Hi, this is Will from School Improvement Tracker. I'm joined today by Annabel Jeffcoate from Balance for Teachers. Morning, Annabel.
Good morning, Will.
How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. Can't complain. It's good to be here with you.
Good. Thank you for joining us this morning. I really appreciate it. Annabel, I just wanted to kind of ask you this morning, if you don't mind, could you tell me a little bit more about who Balance for Teachers are, what your sort of role is with them, and what kind of gave you the passion and the drive to get into teacher wellbeing and work-life balance in particular?
Great question. Yeah. So, what is balance for teachers? So, hopefully, it's sort of a little bit in the name. I'm a teacher work-life balance coach. So, I work with teachers to be able to reduce anxiety and be able to switch off with ease. So, ditch the overthinking and reduce all of those triggers that can lead to burnout and unfortunately lead to teachers leaving the profession and something that they started loving. And then within 5 years is the current stats, they are out of the door and there is a huge turnover of teachers, and the next generation needs those teachers to be there for them, but they need them to be there fully. And unfortunately, especially with the last couple of years, many teachers are exhausted. They're starting to not necessarily lose interest. They love teaching, but it's all the additional workload that they're finding heavy. But then there's also a caveat to that, because there is not just the organizational support, it's the individual ability to be able to handle stress and be able to build resilience. So what Balance for Teachers is for is to gift those teachers those life skills to be able to know how to gain balance. So the reason why it's called Balance is I created a strategy with the acronym, we all love an acronym, with the name Balance. So at any point within 30 seconds, a teacher can get themselves back on track, but it doesn't have to be a teacher. I work with teaching assistants, I work with all educational staff, senior leaders, and the balance strategy is all about in the moment being able to reduce the fight and flight response of the body when we perceive a certain stress or if things feel like too much, and we can bring ourselves back on track. And I came up with this strategy laying in bed on a Christmas morning thinking, oh my gosh, this was during the pandemic. I was laying back and I was like, I need to somehow put into a very simple way how educational staff can gain control again in a very short amount of time, because they don't have time. They are already working 60-hour plus weeks. And I know from personal experience, when you're burnt out, you do not have the energy to go and start something brand new or try and go on a health kick or try and do, you just literally like, I just want to stop. I just want to breathe and stop. So I looked back over my 10 years of recovery. That was 10 years. When I look back at it, I'm like, wow, I didn't have a clue how to recover from burnout. I was quite young when I experienced it, and I got to stage 5 burnout where I was having seizures. So by the age of 21, I was in hospital. I was having seizures because my body had become so fatigued from burnout. It was just shutting itself off from reality. And I remember going into whatever I can call is a big brother house. And I got filmed for about 6 weeks, all day, every day, just to try and see what was triggering the seizures. And I remember feeling so angry and lost when they turned around to me and said, Annabel, there's nothing we can give you. It's psychological. And I was like, what? I'm not making it up. My body is generally shutting itself down. And it was. Over years of studying, I found out that actually the low blood sugars, the lack of energy in my body and everything else was actually causing me to faint and then have a seizure. Now, at the time, they were saying you just have to work on reducing anxiety. And I remember walking out of the center thinking, the only person that can help me is me. Like, I'm the only person that can help me. And I spent thousands and thousands of pounds making mistakes, going to the wrong person, paying for private therapy, coaching, went to nutritional help, everything. And because I had to go to all these different places and try all these different things, there was no real support back then. That's what I love. I mean, one good thing out of this lockdown experience we've had is the awareness of mental well-being for everyone, not just education. But at 10 years ago, or 10 plus years ago now, that wasn't there for me. And mental health wasn't a big thing. People just told me to get a grip and get hold of myself and just sort it out. So I tried, and I went through all these different hurdles, tried all these different things. And I just became more and more interested in what worked and what didn't work. Became a nutritional advisor, qualified in healing the body through nutrition, qualified in mindset, so working through the levels of consciousness. But I focused all of my stuff on studying advanced stress management so that I could see, well, what is the science behind what I did? Like, I know what I did, I know how I recovered, but what was the science behind it? And how do I help other people to do it? Now, that was a long journey, but that Christmas morning, I just laid there and I went, how do I let someone do this in 30 seconds? I somehow need to help people to do that. So I created the balance strategy, and I've been working with teachers. So the reason why this came up through the lockdown is because I had these skills. Prior to this, I was working in London in a fitness studio that I ran. And I was like, I'm ready for a change of direction. I'm ready to take my skills somewhere where people can really benefit from my experience. And I sat back in the lockdown and my heart just cried watching the teachers and the amount they were doing, the amount they were on the screens, the fact they couldn't sleep, they were overthinking. And it was like a flash of light of me repeating all of that experience that I'd had over those 10 years. And I thought, I have to find a way to help. So at the end of I think it was the second lockdown, I released a 5-day free challenge and I gave my balance strategy away, and it worked wonders. So that is kind of the short story of the last sort of 15, 16 years. But the balance strategy is the key behind balance for teachers. And it's about getting something into the educational sector without adding more work. We don't want to add to the to-do list. We want to reduce it. And that is what we're here for. We're to show how you can build stress resilience very simply, very quickly, with not a huge budget, and being able to just go, right, how do we apply this and go for it?
Brilliant. Thank you, Annabel. And I really appreciate your honesty and openness. You know, it's not always easy talking about this. All of us have, at one point or another, sort of sat back and felt like we were under huge amounts of pressure in our life and in our and especially at the moment over the last few years, dealing with COVID and the effects that that's had within our education system. So thank you for explaining everything, and I really appreciate it. And you're right so much that mental health and mental well-being and work-life balance has really become a forefront focus over the last few years. And obviously now with people working at home, and as you were sort of discussing, teachers working remotely and delivering remotely, it has really sort of drawn our attention to how important it is to have good habits and maintaining good habits, especially when people have tried to pick them up, especially over the summer holidays when they've had a bit of time to relax. And I suppose, how have teachers and schools been working with you to improve their sort of overall outlook at work and improving their ability to switch off without feeling guilty this summer?
It's been a really interesting summer, Will, because again, I've been watching, because knowing the experience of burnout, you don't necessarily feel it fully when you're in it. So a lot of teachers felt this. They had the adrenaline rush. They were in that fight flight mode of just keep surviving through the pandemic. And I waited for the summer holidays. I could see everyone posting on Instagram going, it's like 2 weeks to go, 3 weeks to go. We're going to get where we're going to get there. And I thought, they're going to crash. Every single one of them is going to crash, and they're going to feel it. They're going to start to feel it. And it's becoming more and more apparent now, because you don't feel it when you're in it. The hardest point is when you stop. So I work with teachers at the moment who say, you know what, I'm fine. I tell myself I'm leaving work, I'm going home. I get home and I sit on the sofa, and all I can think about is my to-do list of things I've got to do tomorrow. Like, I just can't switch off. I've told myself I'm home, but they've been working at home. So their environment at home is reminding them of work. They're at work and that's reminding them of work. They're in that reaction mode because they have been for the last 2 years just reacting. What are we doing next? What's going to happen next? What are we going to do? And I sort of sat back and thought, they're going to crash, and a lot of them are going to experience leisure sickness. So leisure sickness is where we get to the end of term and then we all get sick. And most teachers spend the first 1 or 2 weeks ill with colds, tonsillitis. I was seeing it all being posted. It's not uncommon. It's so not uncommon that there's an actual name behind it, because it's not just in the education sector. Any sector where there is high stress and then nothing, your adrenaline plummets when you go into those holidays. You feel it. So in the last week or two, you're more susceptible, right? You no longer have this protection, and your cortisol levels are still high, which means your body is not ready. And unfortunately, especially in education, you're surrounded by kids that have colds and everything else, and you catch it just as you're about to go on holiday and get that rest that you wanted. So when we went into the summer holidays, I watched a lot of all school staff just crash, get sick in the first couple of weeks. Did a few lives as well. And I was hearing from senior leaders all the way through the school how they were taking 4 to 5 weeks just to feel like themselves again, which is not unexpected, right? They only just at the end of the 6-week holiday started to feel like themselves, which means when they come back this term or any term, I give them 1 or 2 weeks before they start becoming disinterested. They start to feel the lethargic again. The potential risk for those that were very close to burnout, they may eventually go on sick leave again, because even though they've come back thinking they've been replenished, they haven't fully supported their body. So they've managed to just switch off, so they know it's possible. But then as soon as they come back in, they're in a position where they're losing all those good habits again, as you were mentioning. Well, they're kind of going back into that old habit of all or nothing. So they either do nothing in the holidays and then everything when they come back, or they find themselves just feeling that anxiety. The number of people I coach that have said, oh, my anxiety picked up a week before, and I was thinking of all the things I needed to get done for school. The question is, was it even necessary? Did they have to do all of that stuff, or was it in excess? And it's just that trying to gain control. So over the last few months, I've been speaking to schools and researching where they're at right now, and developing the audit with yourself to find that environment that when they come back, they don't feel like they're going back into the, oh, I have to meet all these expectations that they perceive. The key thing is that it's all down to perception. So if an individual perceives that the expectation is that they have to have this glorious classroom when they go back, and everything has to be in the right place, and the standards have to be incredibly high, but the senior leaders are like, 50% of that would have been fine, right? So it's this miscommunication. So we've been working on an audit to say, how do we create an organizational support with clear expectations? And the thing with Balance for Teachers, my biggest objective with schools or individuals is keeping it simple. It's one of my core values. It has to be kept simple, because if you're already stressed out, schools as organizations already are, because they've got to deal with catch up, low budgets, everything else going on. They don't want to, spend a fortune on consultants coming in regularly and going through step by step with them. They just need the easy steps to implement, so that they can do it in their own pace, in their working hours, and create a culture, because a culture cannot be built in a week. You can hire a consultant to come in for a week. You still have to do all of that work and be able to have access. So with the audit, I gave that opportunity. We've done it in a way that you have all of the information on the how to do it, but you also have that access for quick questions and feedback to just drop me a message and say, I'm a bit stuck with this. And if we need to go down the consultancy route, you can, but you don't have to, because it takes time to breed a culture. And it's about working to your essence pace. So with these habits that teachers and school staff feel that they can kind of relax, they can read books in the holidays, they can do other things. Guess what? They can do it in school time too. It is possible, but they have to have that harmony, and they have to know how to find that harmony. And that's what the audit's all about. It's about creating an environment which sets clear expectations, so that staff know that it's okay to have a work-life harmony. It's okay to leave on time, but they also have the autonomy to make the choice themselves.
And I think, you touched on it briefly as well, about maintaining those habits as well. In your experience, do you find that sort of schools and teachers generally maintain these habits when they come back to the new academic year, or is it a bit of a mad rush in those sort of first few weeks, the month of September?
For me, it's It's difficult for me to say as fact, because obviously I don't know every school and every school example and reason. But from my experience, I hear a lot of people, I mean, the clients that I work with, obviously they are maintaining habits now, which is brilliant. So when we are working on the Discover Life Outside Work Accelerator, which is a monthly accelerator program I have for staff, those school staff are in preparation. So they understand the strategies, they understand the skills. And one top tip I gave over the summer was, whenever you create a new habit, it takes time to learn. Same with the audit. It's going to take time to create it. But once your procedures and processes are in place, it's very simple, because we have something called ego depletion. So throughout the day, the more decisions you make, the more tired you are at the end of the day. Now, you can just imagine a teacher, for example, the number of decisions just in that 1 hour of one lesson that they have to make. By the end of the day, they're exhausted. So they don't want to go and learn a new recipe to eat healthy. They don't really want to go and, start a new hobby. Whereas the holidays are a great time to say, okay, what do I want to do? Like, what do I want to do in my me time? What lights me up? What makes me feel good? And I've had one of my clients start running. And I said to her, okay, what usually happens when you start running in the holidays? She said, you know what? We get back to school and then work takes over and I don't have time. I said, right, okay, well, what are your boundaries for work? And when will you not be working when you go back to school? And she turned around and said, well, actually I could go at 7 p.m. I'm never working at 7 p.m. It works with the kids' bedtime and things like that. I could go out for a run at that point with my friend, doesn't cause any problems. So great, do it at that time in the holidays and then keep doing it at that time when you go back. But we have this perception that we can only either be on holiday or be at work. So a lot of people try to compensate really in running into September with the element of control. And this is where the school comes in, because when we don't have that understanding or clear expectation of what's going to happen, we start to do more. So you'll notice this a lot with people in the teaching profession. If they feel out of control, and guilty as charged, I used to do the same. I now can apply balance when I feel myself going, oh, I'm just going to add to my to-do list. I can just go, ooh, apply balance. There's obviously some place in your life right now, Annabel, you feel out of control. Now, that happens very often with people that are highly educated. They are doers. They can do. It's the being part and the sitting still when they feel that they don't really know what's happening, the problems arise. So if you're an organization as a school, we want to be clear what the expectations are. In the audit, we talk about an academic planner. We talk about a personal planner as well. So we understand what is happening within our school environment. And this has been applied in schools and worked really, really well, because people can see what's coming up and yet they have autonomy to be able to plan their own work. So I worked with a teacher in the last couple of weeks who was feeling anxious about starting in a new school. And a lot of staff members were coming up to her saying, it's a really difficult class. And I said, well, what does that even mean? What does a difficult class mean? What does a challenging class mean? That's not very specific, because her experience of challenging was 19 children misbehaving in an old school and not being supported. Whereas this new school, there was only like 5 or 6 people in that class. So her perception of challenging, completely different. She could probably handle this new class, no problem. But her experience is 19, 20 children running around, and she's having to deal with that. And that's a lot more decisions and a lot more support that she needs to give. So we've got to be clear. If we're saying it's a challenging class, how are they challenging? Like, what are the specifics about that class? Is it a certain child, something that they do? If it is, how can we give that information clearly and concisely so that that teacher can then use the coping strategy of planning? And they can plan, they know what's going to happen. They know if those certain children are going to play up in a certain way, what strategies they could try, and they can learn from those strategies. But if we just say words that are, challenging, or we have a parents' evening, but we're not sure when we're going to have it yet, reports will be in, but we haven't actually said how much we really want on the reports. in terms of detail, because I've seen certain people, especially in comments in books, they are like essays, and they don't need to be. They can be very clear and concise. So when we feel that we have lack of control or lack of certainty, which can be provided as much as possible from an organization. Yes, there's going to be times where things come from above. And we hear that a lot on social media from new government things coming out and people reacting to that. And this is again a problem, because you get that reaction in the social media and you're going back to school with a element of fear, when actually, you know, people might be prepared for it and they might know, or it might not even affect you at all. So it's having the communication, the clarity, and being concise and clear so that people can then work with what they have. If they don't know what's happening, they come in and they just do more because it's a form of feeling that you're in control when you're not, right? You're not in control, because all you've done is add more to your workload. So yes, it's on an individual basis. Yes, there's going to be stuff coming from above, but those people in middle management and senior leaders, they need to be able to clearly communicate, even when they don't know, honestly, and say, okay, right now there is a new legislation coming out, or they've decided to change the curriculum again, or there's new Ofsted regulations, whatever it is, we need to be able to say, we've been informed of this and we will keep you updated, even when there's no updates. So people are aware of what is happening. And we talk all about this in the audit, you know, obviously in this conversation, Will, we're being very like kind of in an overview essence, but in the audit it's done very clearly and simply so that you can set these procedures. People can start to experience a feeling of certainty and knowing what to expect, so they don't have that anxiety and build up. You'll notice in teachers that have been in teaching professions for 20 plus years that they are a lot quicker at responding to things. They have experience, but an NQT is just constantly in anxiety learning mode all the time. And we don't want that to last for 5-6 years, because they'll leave. We need them to be able to say, okay, I am still learning, and giving themselves that time and patience to learn. But I know I have the support of my organization, and I know what to expect when I go into the new term, what my new class is going to be like. And I have at least a little bit of information to work from.
I mean, it's easy, isn't it? You know, when we're sort of talking about that new academic year, and that sort of, obviously it's not easy for most teachers, and it's quite a challenging time of the year. And you spoke a lot about sort of maintaining those good habits as well. If you're going to sort of narrow it down then out of your sort of list, what would you say are sort of the 3 key ways that schools and teachers can help to maintain those good habits moving into the new academic year?
If we're thinking of just 3 simple, easy ways, I think the main thing for me is routine versus variety. So this is number 1, routine versus variety. Because if you have a lot of life events going on, then you're not going to handle much at work. If your life is quite routine, then you'll find that you'll be able to handle quite a lot of change at work. So one of the biggest points for me is that when you are thinking about changing habits, in times when it's quiet, so in the summer, you can change and you can create new things, you can try new things and have that variety. When you go back, you need routine. This is on an individual level. As a school and organization, you want the same. So we don't want to take the audit and just go, right, we're going to change everything, because you're just going to increase the stress for everyone. Right now, people are still recovering from the constant change that they had during the pandemic. And it's going to take a couple of years, not only to just catch the children up, but also to help the teachers and the staff just get back into routine again, but make it an improved routine. Like, make it clear and precise in terms of how they are developing. Now, we often talk about like PTSD and how, you know, post-traumatic stress and things like that. You can actually have post-traumatic growth, but we don't often talk about it. And there's people that sort of go, you know, we're going to go down this road. Well, actually, you can grow from it. You know, I started balance for teachers from extreme circumstances, which could have kept me in my life in extreme circumstances forever. But I spent a few years with very solid routines, making sure that I could keep my routines as solid as possible, creating procedures, And I found that the more I did that, the more I was able to recover, and the more I was able to then say, right, well, now I want more variety because I'm getting a bit bored, right? So we all have a different optimal level, and it's going to be different for different people. So some people are going to find they love variety and they love change, and other people are going to be like, right, I really need to have that information. And part of the audit, we talk about strengths and people's strengths. So routine versus variety is extremely important. Communication is invaluable. So we need to make sure that we are clear. And I've heard about people having meetings and then not having the right people in there, or having people that shouldn't be in there, having lack of communication where people don't know what's happening. I've worked with head teachers in schools where during the pandemic, they had certain parents or coming in and sort of trying to control, right? Because the parents were in fear as well. They were trying to control and saying, right, okay, I want to know everything you're going to teach my child. And they're like, well, I can't. I'm currently trying to deal with everything else. I can't just go and tell you everything I'm going to teach your child, because I'm teaching a class of 30 plus children. So it's about communicating before they start to speak. Now, sometimes, again, you can't do it. You have to respond in a certain way. But there's a lot of things we know in advance, and you can have templates in place. Administrative staff can step in and support in these sort of things. You can voice note them, and you can say, right, this is the information that all staff need to know now. You can have it in a template. It goes out very quickly, and everyone can know, because we have the online ability now. If anything, we've had that growth of online stuff coming into schools. We have the audit, very simple way of being able to access information, various audits very, very quickly, and be able to come in at times when you need to just refresh and say, okay, I need that bit of information. So communication is really important, to be specific. So it reduces anxiety, because anxiety is the fear of the unknown. It's coming from a perception of an experience, whether you've seen something in a movie, or you've heard something on social media, or you've genuinely experienced something. If people are going online and they're just seeing a lot of teachers panicking, or a lot of teachers I've seen over the last few weeks posting classroom pictures, but then you've got these big accounts that are doing these extravagant classrooms, and then just not necessary. They've done it for social media, or what they've done is they've replicated a room that they've done over the last few years. So they've maybe got it on a rota basis, and they had all the stuff prepared, yet someone else is coming, looking at it and going, I'm going to have to create all of this for my kids, right? And I have only this amount of time to do it in. So it's having that clear communication of your expectation of your staff and what their roles are. Give yourself permission, right? This is my other one. Like, give yourself permission. I love when my clients have breakthroughs, because I get a little bit emotional. I don't always cry, but you can usually tell, like, my eyes start to tear up, because I'm like, yes, because I've been there myself. I know how hard it is as an individual to do things like letting go, like just sitting still. When you've been under stress for a couple of years, sitting down and sitting still is hard, right? You know, when I was doing it, people said, just get a grip, just lay on the sofa, just relax. I couldn't do it. I felt physically sick. I'd shake, I'd stand up, sit down, I'd pick up my phone, I'd try and go online, and I would just start to panic. And all of the stuff I hadn't dealt with from the traumas would start to come up, and I would uncontrollably cry. I couldn't focus on anything. So we have to give ourselves permission to have that work-life balance. Now, I use the word work-life balance because people connect with it. But in honesty, I had a huge conversation a few years ago with another coach in America, and we were talking about how balance is a horrible word, really, because you can't have it. You can't have balance. You'll never get there, because life is fluid. Whereas if you think about creating a harmony and giving yourself permission to have a harmony, that is what the balance strategy is about. It's not about never having anxiety or having a perfect school where everyone's got the brilliant work-life balance. It's about saying, how do we create the harmony which allows people to, in the moment, have a flexible mindset, a growth mindset, to be able to say, right, in this moment, I can feel my body is becoming overwhelmed. I can feel that I need to stop and take a breather, and it's okay, and I can do that. And individuals find that very, very difficult, because they fear things like losing their job, not being there for the kids, right? So many staff teachers at the moment aren't even really thinking about their burnout. They're having to be signed off by the GP. And it's not just a week. For schools, they're losing staff for a month. Like, people being signed off for 4 weeks. How much of the budget is going to replace that staff? Like, we're having to actually replace them and things. So we've got to say, right, we've got to give permission for the staff to have a work-life balance. You know, walking around the school, we talk about in the audit, walking around and having a presence, knowing your staff, knowing when they're struggling, and not stepping in to save them, because you can't save anyone. I don't save people. I'm there to listen and hear them and help them to find their own answers, because you don't want to be holding your staff's hand all the time. You want to be there saying, right, you're noticing someone working late every single evening. They have the right to work late if they choose, but you can step in and have a procedure, which we talk about in the audit, saying, how can we ask, is this necessary? Can you extend a deadline? I had someone come to me that just follows me on social media. She's not a direct client. She sent me a message and she went, I was signed off, went to my GP. They've told me I've got burnout, things like that. And I've been reading your posts. And I went to my line manager and I said, I'm going to struggle. Can I hand my reports in 2 days late so that I can actually get it done in the day and sleep? And they turned around and said, of course, no problem. Now, most teachers don't even ask. They will stay up all night trying to get it done, and they will over excessively do it when all they had to do was step and ask and say, I need that extra time. And she was so over the moon. And she sent me this message to say, thank you so much. I wouldn't have even thought of asking, but I asked. And because I asked, my health was supported and I could sleep and I could recover. So the 3 biggest things is having a harmony of routine versus variety, ensuring you've got clear communication, and give yourself permission and give your staff permission to have that work-life harmony.
It's so important, isn't it? And we've spoken a lot about maintaining good habits, but I think those 3 points obviously kind of summarize everything we've just spoken about. And as you say, it is very, very crucial, not just in education, but in all walks of life. But obviously, the way that education has been moving in the last couple of years, and how, as you sort of talked about, people have picked up some good habits over the summer holidays, and now with those 3 tips and tricks, they will hopefully be able to maintain them moving into the new academic year. You've mentioned quite a lot about sort of in your past, the burnout and the kind of the symptoms that surround that. And I know that a lot of people kind of hear the word burnout and think of lots of different things. They read things on social media, they see things on websites. There's loads of information out there. But what is burnout? And what generally are the physical and mental signs of burnout beginning to happen to somebody?
Great question, because it's one of those words that's thrown around with no specific meaning. So people go, I'm burnt out. What does that actually mean? Like, what does that look like? How do I see that in my staff? So burnout, as a definition, is chronic work stress. Now, chronic stress is any stress that lasts longer than 4 weeks. Now, that can kind of make you laugh a little bit because you've had 2 years of it in the educational sector, where it's been chronic for over 2 years. But not just that, some people have had chronic stress for 20 years, and it's not just the stress of what they're experiencing at work. So burnout, in the terms of when you research it, things like that, they say it's work-related stress. However, for me personally, my burnout wasn't due to work-related stress. When I was 12 years old, there wasn't pupil mental well-being. People weren't really aware as much of that sort of thing. And I lost someone very close to me and I didn't grieve. So there have been arguments about, do we help for those children that have been grieving? And I absolutely love seeing all of the emotional well-being that people are doing for children. Because all of the different, understanding emotions and knowing what they mean and being able to point out their emotions with these cute little toys, brilliant. So I think that's brilliant, because I didn't have that. So I actually lost someone when I was 12, and my burnout was because I went in by 16. I had an eating disorder, which is again now recognized, because if you study nutrition or anything like that, they actually state one of the reasons someone could have an eating disorder is because, as a teenager, is because of grief. So it's actually in the medical information now when you study nutrition, and the effect of that on the body and the lack, that is stress in itself. So by the time I was 21, I was having seizures. I was a A-star pupil, right? I got a first class degree. It wasn't that I wasn't smart. It was that I was trying to control things. And the only way I knew how I could control the perception of death, as it were, was to do more. So I just tried to do more. I tried to please people, and I just tried to do more and more and control my food as much as I could, because I wasn't interested in celebrities or anything like that. It was the control that I was trying to have. So I tried to control everything in my life, from my work to my food to how I did things. And eventually I became more and more isolated, and eventually it became a known illness. So there is, I can't remember the two gentlemen's name now. There is a formal stage, 5 stages of burnout, which I talk about. I have a free burnout guide. And in that guide, I have popped the guys' names in there, but they are difficult to pronounce, so I won't embarrass myself and try to pronounce them incorrectly. So there are 5 categories, and I slightly changed the way that they phrase them. So the categories are the same as they have released in their studies, but I've put it in a different wording, and I've called it break. So in the Burnout Recovery Guide, I give away for free. This guide is really for people to be able to understand when they notice they're experiencing burnout. So the first thing is bliss, right? If you're in bliss, you go into the school environment and you can respond to the children's needs. You are prepared for everything that you need. If you make a mistake, you go, oh, well, no problem. This is how we fix it, right? This is an ideal world. Bliss is where we all want to be. It's just that point where we're able to focus and we're able to deal with things. Now, what happens is, as stress begins to build, like I said, in the formal definition, it's chronic stress at work. However, for me personally, it was actually a personal situation that happened that didn't get dealt with emotionally, and I pressed it down and just hid it for years. And eventually it formed itself in burnout. So I'd burn out, I'd go into the cycle, I'd go back, I'd burn out, I'd crash, I'd go back, and I was in an all or nothing cycle. So we have this bliss point, which we want to be at, and we can at any point go back through these stages. The next one is react. And this is what you want to catch your staff doing. So what happens is we start to react to things. We might snap at things a lot quicker. You might find that you start emotional eating. So you are starting to eat because your hormone levels start to change. Your hunger hormones change as well with your stress response. You'll notice in staff that they have lack of focus. I hear so many teachers beat themselves up because they've got about 13 tabs open. Now, I know personally nowadays, if I've got more than 2 or 3 tabs open, I am reacting, right? I'm feeling overwhelmed. I need to get some Post-it notes out, and I just need to decide, what am I doing first? Get rid of the others, put them to one side, and just focus on that one thing. Because your brain works in a certain way. If you are in stress response, your limbic part of your brain will kick in. And when that part of your brain kicks in, you're in reaction mode. You can't stop it. It takes less than 9 seconds to happen. And the reaction mode is where your body's going, there is a threat, and you go into subconscious behaviors. And the ability to focus is in your prefrontal cortex. That's at the front of your brain. Now, if you've shut that off and you're in reaction mode, how are you meant to focus? Yet so many people go, oh, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? Oh, I can't believe I forgot to do that. And I'm forgetting all these things. I hear that often from teachers. Oh my gosh, what if I forget something tomorrow? Well, you're probably going to if you're really under stress and you're just reacting to everything. So if you're noticing your staff are being forgetful, if you're noticing that they're making errors consistently, if you're noticing that they are emotional, if they are emotional eating, you'll notice if they're going to the staff room and they're just eating loads and loads of the biscuits and stuff. You don't have to comment on it, of course. You just get to be there and able to listen. Because again, with anything, people have to be ready to go forward themselves. So I don't forcefully bring anyone on into work-life balance with me or working with me. They have to message me. So I put my information out there clearly, and when they're ready, they message me, because they have to be willing and ready to make those changes. So if you're noticing staff react, they've started to creep into that feeling of stress. So it's those behavioral patterns, the reaction. There's a book called The Chimp Paradox, and he talks about the chimp brain. So if you think about it like that, if people are starting to get a little bit, not chimp-like, but they're starting to react and they're not necessarily having that cognitive concentration where they're thinking clearly, they need a break, right? They need to find their essence pace, or they need to reduce anxiety by being clear on what they need to do. And that's where the line managers can step in, just sit with them and go through their work and say, right, okay, how are you feeling? What's going on right now? What can we get rid of, and how can we support you? If that goes too far, you get into exhaustion, which is the E in break. So you'll start to notice there's people that have some good days, some bad days. They're generally fatigued a lot more. They're not necessarily as enthusiastic about what they do. They are just finding it difficult to get through the day. So exhaustion is appearing. You'll start to see it in the way they're speaking, in their body language, in what they're doing. That's when physical symptoms can start to creep in. So they might start getting sick a little bit more, but not necessarily a lot yet. The next stage is accelerate. So then they start to get ill more often. They're having more sick days. They're unable to function. The adrenals are getting fatigued. They've been on chronic stress for too long. And you're starting to see physical symptoms. You know, physical symptoms. I used to have really bad acne when I was burnt out. It really shows in the body. You'll have lots of, and it's not to say that's the only reason for acne. It's to say that if your body is under stress, you're going to see it, you know, bags under the eyes, generally run down and gaunt in the face. You're going to notice in that person the exhaustion, even the way they dress. You know, when I know that I'm starting to feel more and more exhausted, it's because I don't put my makeup on in the morning. Like I won't do it because I just don't have the energy to do it. I'll feel like, you know, I can't be bothered to put some nice clothes on. Like I'll just throw on any baggy clothes and I'll just be like, now it's okay every now and again if you need to relax. But if you're going to school and you're noticing someone's dress sense is starting to get scruffier and scruffier, it's a behavior we get to be aware of. We don't need to reprimand that person. We need to be aware that there's either something going on in life or the stress in work is becoming too much. So the symptoms start to accelerate. You see more and more of this. They're getting more and more sick days. They're struggling to focus. Physical symptoms are starting to creep up in a bigger way. And the final stage is the known. And the known stage is when you have a GP diagnose. And it doesn't necessarily mean burnout is diagnosed. Unfortunately, it can be, I mean, I had IBS problems. I had seizures diagnosed. So they're known as dissociative seizures. Breaking away from reality as a coping strategy. Your brain and your body is so clever, it will take over when you don't look after it. And that's exactly what happened to me. So I got to that known stage of stage 5, and I had to really work backwards over 10 years to get out of that. So if we can notice in an organization at the react point, when people are starting to have these behaviors and they're starting to react, we can be there to listen and help them help themselves, because we can't hold them, we can't save anyone, and we can't hold their hands forever. We need to be able to guide them. But in the burnout definition that you'll find online and genuine psychological studies, they give 3 categories. So feelings of exhaustion is one of them. So one of the elements, you'll see that they're exhausted, not necessarily contributing as much, less creative. It's very hard to be creative when you're in stress mode. Detachment from your job, right? It literally brings tears to my eyes when I get messages or I see posts from teachers and teaching members, staff in any educational setting, and they're posting things on Instagram or Facebook where they're like, I just can't be bothered anymore. Like, and you'll see it in Facebook groups where they're talking to other teachers and they're like, does anyone else feel like this? I just don't want to go to work, right? I just don't feel passionate about it anymore. And it's such a shame. And the feelings of negativity and cynicism about the job, right? If you think about when people start teaching, they're really enthusiastic. They're like, I can't wait to get my new year class. Like, I'm really, really enthusiastic. That doesn't have to go. That doesn't have to disappear. Yes, some people go through their lives and they start new chapters. I began in fitness. I moved from fitness into mental well-being and health and into nutrition. So my chapter changed, the people I support changed, because I grew with experience. So yes, you'll have some people that start in teaching, they decide it's not for them, and then they go off on their own route. But what we are finding is actually it's more to do with burnout. And the biggest concern I have, I'm working with a few people in terms of supporting teachers out of education as well, because I don't want people to take that negativity and cynicism because they're burnt out and then just move to another role and then just be burnt out there. So it's, yes, sometimes the school environment, and I've seen teachers this year actually leave schools because their environment was not supporting them, and they've moved to another school and they've been fine. The organization has supported them. They haven't carried their burnout symptoms. The concern I have is when they go to another area, completely new area, they then try and learn new things. They try and all this different stuff, and they don't have that health support that they need. And in actual fact, they probably didn't need to leave in the first place. Like if they'd actually been supported, they wouldn't have had the sick leave. They wouldn't have had that feeling of cynicism, and they would have felt a lot better. And I've had people that I've coached say, like, I walk up to my school and as soon as I hit the playground, I feel physically sick. And you're like, you should not be going to work with a meaning that is so deep rooted that it is physically making you sick and you're having a panic attack before you've even opened your classroom door, right? Someone could have spotted that way at the beginning in that react mode. So feelings of exhaustion, detachment from your job, and feelings of negativity and cynicism are the three psychological ones that are put out there for you to be able to spot those physical symptoms in your staff. But I do have the break. I call it break because we don't want to get to the end and actually break. So we work through and we can at any point go back to bliss. It is possible. I've done it. I'm living proof. You can get from stage 5 back to bliss. You just need the correct support and guidance.
And I think you've touched on this a lot through what we were just saying as well. And, you know, I'm sure you and I and everybody out there today knows of somebody over the last couple of years who has had to take time off work, extensive periods of time off work, months and months and months in some cases, where they've just been physically unable to do it from burnout and from the symptoms that you mentioned, things like fatigue and self-loathing and cynicism around the work that they're doing. And this is no different in education, is it? You know, how have you been seeing, how has burnout been affecting the number of people who are currently on mental health sick leave and the number of people who are sort of looking to leave education, especially in the last couple of years?
It's difficult because again, everything's done by perspective. So obviously I'm watching it from being very focused on reducing stress-related illness. That is my purpose, it's my mission in my company. It's a mission of Balance for Teachers, is to reduce stress-related illness in the educational sector. And so I see, and probably my brain will see more posts of people going, I have to change schools, I have to leave education, because I see it, and I get messages daily from teachers going, please help. I'm constantly, I can't sleep at night, I'm not eating, and all these other things that are happening. So I had a little delve into the Teacher Wellbeing Index, which is a study that goes out every single year. They do the educational support charity does their own study. Now, they did one with 3,034 teaching staff, school staff, all different varieties. And they came back with the statistics in 2020 that 52% of people in the educational sector in the last 2 years considered leaving the profession because of their health and well-being.
Wow.
Like 52%, right? That's
Gosh.
like looking at your staff right now, and half your staff members are going to walk out the door. Right? And you have to cope with that. Like, how are you going to cope with that? If half your staff, or just over half, are just going to walk out the door? And they break it down even further into that. And they say that for those who considered leaving, there were key issues. So stress, 63% were stressed compared to 33% who were not stressed. So Yeah, some of them were leaving, they weren't stressed, but for health reasons, but 63% were experiencing stress. And you can build stress resilience, like in schools and in people, quite simply with very small areas, such as gratitude. You see teachers do a lot. Hope, self-compassion, and optimism are the four. I call it the diamond. Pressure makes diamonds. I got a message when I had burnout from my partner a few years ago, and he just sent me a message saying pressure makes diamonds. And I saw these four categories and I thought, we've got to put that into a diamond. And just think how easy it is to have gratitude in your school on a daily basis. We teach children to do it. Why can't we do it too? So building stress resilience is vital. Not surprising, working hours. So many working over 60 hours or more per week. And I've actually had a client message, I call it a win. We do celebrate our wins at Balance for Teachers. She posted #win. I literally just put all of my work on my craft table into my car. I've driven it back. It was uncomfortable because some of it was unfinished, but I've taken it all back to school and I don't need to do it. And actually my family place is back. And yes, it was uncomfortable, but when I got home, I felt complete relief. Like the weight off my shoulders had gone. And I have another person in the accelerator who's just demolished their airing cupboard, and they've created a little mini study cupboard area for all work stuff to go out of the way. Again, didn't come from me, their idea. It is completely their idea to do that. But what I'm pointing out here is working hours is about expectations on your staff, because that person that put all the stuff in their car and drove it back was actually a teaching assistant, not a teacher. And I asked her the question, what is your job description in terms of your role? What is the work that you are expected to do? And she recited the work she was expected to do in her role. And I said, so what is the extra work you've chosen to do to fulfill a need within you? And she went, and then she listed off all of this extra stuff she does, like create displays for the entire school, which actually she could say no to. It's not her role or job to do it. It's just that it fulfilled a need in her, which she could fulfill outside of work by being with family in a different way. So sometimes these extra hours are because of the expectations and the work demands that we are putting out, which could be reduced. And we explain this in the audit. There are links available to be able to reduce workload and ideas on how to do that while still ticking the boxes that you need to tick. But again, it's individual level as well as the full level. But they said that over 73% compared to 55% for those working 41 to 60 hours per week, and 40% for those working 40 hours or less. So that was in terms of people leaving because of well-being. So it's pretty high. But I think the one that shocks me the most, Will, which makes it go, the audit is definitely needed and required. Organizational support, 73%. 73% of those leaving because of health and well-being did not feel supported. And that's ridiculous, because the steps in the audit, they're not complicated, they're not hard. They may take time to implement, especially if you've had a certain culture for a long time, or you've replaced someone in leadership and you're bringing in this new model. Then you might go, okay, I can see, staff don't feel supported, but they've already got that expectation they're not going to get supported, if you see what I mean. So we have to change that perspective, which is what takes time. And I use the self-care triangle for teachers, which is about consistency, compassion, and patience. And it actually works for schools as well, and any school or organization. Now, the reason why I use those three, because when I was being coached, I kept hearing, Annabel, have patience. And I'd be like, oh, I'm trying, right? And then people go, be compassionate, be kinder to yourself, stop beating yourself up, right? You don't have to finish everything today. And then I kept saying, from different coaches, I would hear people say, be consistent. Like, I had a fear of being consistent. For whatever reason, there was self-sabotaging behavior in me that wouldn't be consistent. So I created the self-care triangle from these three areas, and it works for schools as well. When you implement this audit, it will take compassion, right? Self-compassion, not for yourself, and also compassion for your staff. They have a perspective. They're going to need to know that you're there to support them and guide them. and that actually when they are struggling, they feel that they can come forward, and that you don't have to implement this. Compassion for yourself. The audit doesn't have to be finished within a week, right? It's not going to happen. You want to have patience because it's going to take that time. You have to be consistent and make sure that you're doing it regularly. You're going back over those procedures and processes. You know when that's going to happen. You're communicating when it's going to happen. So the compassion, consistency, and patience is so important. And 73%, just because they didn't feel that they were being supported, it will take time to change that perception, but it has to change, because that's ridiculous. To lose your staff because they don't feel supported is shocking. But unfortunately, many school leaders are forced to choose between spending priorities. So do they spend on catch up? Do they get those, help those students catch up? Do they help the staff that have been through this pandemic? Because the leaders have been through it too. It's not just the staff. It's not an individual staff member. It's everyone. And they just feel like, do I focus my funds on deep cleaning? Because I have to clean the staff. You've got all the tests that have to be done, everything else. These are difficult decisions. But the great thing about the audit is it's affordable, right? It's affordable within your budget. And it creates such a big difference that in a few years' time, you will make back that return. Because in a few years' time, you'll have a culture that keeps its staff members. You don't need as many people coming in. You're going through that experience of learning through that summer holiday and returning to school. You're just doing it over a longer period. You're learning this new way of working. And then within a few years' time, you'll have that school that you'll have staff wanting to work for you. Because they'll be like, I want to work there because everyone is healthy, happy, they have a good work-life balance. I feel that I could, raise my family and be there for my kids. It hurts me when I read posts that people say I'm there more for other people's kids than my own. And that's ridiculous, right? They should be able to have flexible working. They should have a procedure where they can go to their own child's sports day and be able to do those things too. So the stats are pretty overwhelming. But there are areas within the audit, if anyone wants to read it, it's not the audit, the Teacher Wellbeing Index. If you go to the Teacher Wellbeing Index, you will see there are areas that are improving gradually, but there is definitely a lot more we can do with organisational support, for sure.
And, as you said, that must be an enormous pressure on the schools as well. Staff turnover in any environment is pressure, because obviously everything that surrounds that is training a new staff member, bringing them up to speed on the processes that they need to do, the social element, integrating them within a team and making them to helping them to integrate and become part of that working pattern. But as you said, the good thing is that there are elements out there that schools can help them and drive that change that is so essential to reduce those quite scary statistics that you were sharing with us just then. And so between the work that you're doing at Balance for Teachers and hopefully the work that we've done with you at School Improvement Tracker as well, that and other resources that are out there, there does seem to be a roadmap for teachers and SLT, doesn't there, to help them get everything back on track. And as you said, not go back to an old normal, but recreate what normal is within the school's working environment.
Indeed, yeah. It's just a journey. Like any journey, I had to make my journey. If you want change, if you want to reduce the costs and the overwhelm that you're experiencing as a leader, and you want your staff to be autonomous, they need this ability. Like, they need to have these support network to be able to thrive in the environment in a school, rather than finding that they're getting to that school door and they are feeling sick and anxious and they just don't want to go in because of the fear of how much they're going to have to deal with.
And I think, we've spoken a lot about burnout and what that means. And you just mentioned it there, actually, anxious feeling, anxiety, and all of us experience anxiety, don't you? We all get stressed, we all get a bit worked up, we all get anxious about our day and the work that we're doing. But I think like burnout, there's this kind of mystical space that we don't completely understand when it comes to anxiety, particularly in education as well. And from a teacher and a school standpoint, what is anxiety and how does it affect teachers and schools and the day-to-day running of them?
So I love this because no one ever really defines it. They're like, I'm anxious, but anxious about what? So anxious is a physical response, but it's also a mental of lack of information. So if you have a gap, or if you even just think about a child, right? When I work with teachers, I talk about, if you were working with a child and they were getting anxious, it's usually because it's the first day of school and they have no idea what to expect. They've never experienced it before. So their parent or their teacher will be explaining, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the classroom and your mum or dad's going to come with you. You're going to start to meet some other kids and you're going to play. And then once you've played with the toys, things like that, your teacher is then going to let you know it's break time and you're going to have a break. So we talk children through it. And you'll notice when you start to talk a child through it, they start to understand that they're safe and that they actually have the information they need to know what's going to happen because they can relate to it. Now, there are certain points in life where you're not going to know. Like you can have someone say, right, this, that, and the other is going to happen, but you have not experienced it yourself. So I just started driving again and I was anxious, right? I had driven in the past. I knew it was possible. I wasn't as anxious as I was when I first started driving. But before I got behind the wheel, I could feel the anxiety. So I had to put balance in place and I had to go, breathe, right? Because I had a lack of information. I didn't know what to expect when I got behind the wheel, whether a car was going to come past, whether a bicycle was going to come out, whether I was going to know how to drive the car, and after a few times now, I wouldn't say I'm whizzing around, probably shouldn't say it that way, but I'm driving safely around and I'm okay to do so. And it's only been a few weeks since I've been back in a car. So it's not taken me long for my brain and my body to know and then calm down and relax and put the radio on and just drive myself around. So we all go through this experience of anxiety because there is a gap, okay? There's one of two things. There is either a gap, which means we have this gap of knowledge and we need that support or someone to talk us through and show us the expectations. That's what you can do as a leader, right? You can give people that information to fill the gap. The other issue with anxiety is that it's a part of you or a part of your experience that you've had in the past. And we don't always have this as a conscious thing. When I was having anxious or anxiety panic attacks when I was in my early 20s, I didn't know it was about the death when I was 12. I didn't know that was the reason. But anything that would trigger my brain to connect that feeling of being alone in that moment and losing that person, I would then panic. So I tried to over deliver. I tried to save people all the time. I tried to prevent people from leaving. I never said goodbye. I look back now and I'm like, wow, I actually avoided my last day of school. I avoided saying goodbye when I left dance school and things like that. I never went to the last day of anything because just before that person passed away, I said goodbye. So I had this connection. Now, this is the point where you would have to direct to professional support, right? So if someone is reacting because their anxiety is due to a certain trauma. So certain teachers I've worked with, they've had bullying or harassment in school, and we do cover this in the audit. So they have that negative experience. Now, on a certain level, that can be dealt with in school, and that can be dealt with by leadership and ensuring that you follow the procedure. But if you've got someone who is particularly anxious about a certain situation and it runs deeper and you can kind of tell that they're not responding to the kind of top level things, that is when you need to direct them to a coach, to a therapist, or someone to work a little bit deeper. Because when people have traumas or experiences that are holding them back and they don't feel safe, then they have to work through that and they need the support, the professional support there to guide them. And we talk about creating a calm space in the audit, and you can have all the information. So you can have free phone lines. You can have, if your school's got a budget, you can have a budget for a professional therapist to come in or a coach. You can have access to phone lines. So when I was doing my research in schools, some schools have hired therapists to come in once a week, which is amazing, but not every school has that budget. You might find that you have a free phone line. You might find that I have heard of schools that have actually preferred this. They've paid for a phone line, or, everything I do is online. I work with teachers throughout the world, And I coach people throughout the world because we have the wonder of technology and the online ability to do so. So everything that I do is online, and all of my strategies are online so that people can log in and utilize them and remind themselves whenever they need to, and we can make a huge impact on the educational sector. So when it comes to anxiety, there's two avenues it could be coming from. One, lack of information. That teacher that someone said, you're going to get a challenging class. No wonder she was anxious. What does challenging mean? Right? She's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be struggling because the word challenging to me means this, like 19 kids running around. Whereas challenging to someone else is someone that won't sit still. Like that one pupil that won't sit still is really challenging. So it's all down to perspective and our own experience of things. And the only way we can get through anxiety is to feel how we can make ourselves safe. And this is what the balance strategy does. It takes through, okay, that doesn't feel safe. It's too big a step. How do I bring it back so that I feel safe and I know what is expected? So I know how to, and I actually had to use a client, I had a client who was going into a new experience and she was like, I'm really, really anxious. I said, okay, cool. Do you know how to get out of bed? She went, yeah. I went, okay, cool. Do you know how to get dressed? She was like, yes, I know how to get dressed. Okay. Do you know how to get in the car and drive to this place that you need to go to? Yeah, I can drive. Yeah, I know how to drive. I know how to get there. Cool. All I want you to do is step by step on that day, only do in the present moment what you know how to do. And when you get to the point where you're into a new zone, I want you to 3, 2, 1. So you skip your limbic system, 3, 2, 1, and jump in and go for it. And that evening I got a message that I did it. I got through it. I'm so proud of myself. It was incredible. I loved every second. And it was because her brain was thinking way ahead, like way ahead to that point where she was going to try something new. She just had to get there. That was it. She had to get there. Then 3, 2, 1, when she felt ready, just jump in. So we can only go at the pace that works for us. But anxiety, you have to be aware. It comes in though fight, flight, freeze, or facade, right? So you'll see it in different personality types. Some people will have emotional responses, some people physical responses, sweaty palms, generally feeling anxious, breath going a little bit faster. And actually, anxiety is a good thing. Like Will, that TED talk you sent me the other day, which I had actually seen it before. It's brilliant. I can't remember the lovely woman's name, but she talks about how anxiety is a good thing, because all anxiety is your body saying there is a potential threat. Whether that is because you perceive the similar situation that felt bad previously coming again, or whether you don't know something and it's like you don't feel anxious about getting out of bed in the morning, you know the floor's going to be there, right? It might not be there, but your brain's telling you it's going to be there. So you don't even think about it. You swing your legs out, you jump out of bed, right? But if, for example, you're going to go do a presentation and you don't know how many people are going to be there, you don't know if your slides are ready, you don't know anything, you're going to get more and more anxious of all the things that could go wrong. And if you've had a bad presentation before, you're going to feel like it's going to repeat itself. So it's working through mental rehearsals and all these different techniques you can do for coping strategies to support yourself. So with any experience of anxiety, it's not a bad thing. Anxiety is just when your thalamus in your brain, it triggers that outside of you, there is a threat of some sort, and is going to send to your HPA axis to say, right, start pumping out your stress hormones. And then your breathing starts to go a lot faster. And then you find that your oxygen levels change in your blood. So you are ready, right? You're not going to digest anymore. Everything's gone to the outside and you're ready to go. You're ready to fight or run away from that lion that is not really chasing you. It's just the reports that you've got to get done, right? So it's really about being able to have a mindset of growth, being able to, in the moment, draw that back in. And Mel Robbins, who is incredible, she talks about, in terms of your body, that physical response, rewinding it. Like to start a car, you have to put the key in the ignition, turn the car, then you go through the steps, right? Now, your body does the same thing. For some people, the first thing they feel is they start to breathe a bit deeper. Some people get teary-eyed. Some people start to feel sick because all the blood vessels in their stomach shrink in order to send it out elsewhere. We call it butterflies, right? So it's that feeling. Some people, their heart sinks. It's that sensation of sinking in the heart. It's about knowing how you physically respond before you mentally do, because your body is faster than your mind. So if you know that you feel physically sick when you're starting to feel stressed, stop. You implement balance in whatever form that is for you. Take a breath, relax the body, and then you go from there and you make your decision. So you become self-sufficient. And you know, I run this 5-day free challenge, Discover Life Outside Work challenge for teachers, where I explain this balance method and this strategy. And every single day we do a me time assignment, which is less than 15 minutes because I always keep it simple. And through that week, I just support everyone in that 5 days in that Facebook group. And they come in, they do all of the different challenge tasks, very, very simple tasks to do, to experience implementing balance. And then they can come back to school and do it. And obviously everyone who has the audit will be able to access this 5-day challenge, and they can send their staff to it, because it doesn't have to all be you. I mean, we joked at the beginning, Will, didn't we, when we first spoke about this, and we said, oh, what could we do in terms of this audit? What sort of ideas do we have? And I said, well, the leaders need to be making sure that they're doing the audit at work, right? Because you have to lead by example, and you have to be doing that and making sure that you're having a work-life harmony, rather than all of this extra stuff that you have to do can be delegated. No one says that you have to do all of the audit yourself. You don't. There are going to be people that you can delegate to that want to do it. You know, ask their permission. Say, do they want to do it? Do they have the space to do it? Because we want to have that communication to be clear and specific. They may want to browse over it first. You might want to browse over it. If you're thinking, okay, I'm really interested in this audit, you might want to go on the School Improvement Tracker website. You might want to request a demo. You may want to look at it and say, okay, what does this all entail? Because I kind of get the idea of it, but how much work is this? You may be feeling anxiety about it, but that's a good thing, because you have this curiosity and this interest to try. And Will's, you know, it's great. They've got it in a demo form so that you can ask questions, get them answered. Because the worst thing you can do is sort of sit back and say, right, looks great, but I don't really know what it is, so I'm not going to bother, because it could probably be more work, because you might have that perspective. But you go and do the demo and you go, oh, it's so simple, right? It's so simple. It's color coordinated. And half this stuff I've actually got in place already. I just need to tweak a few things. Or you might think, well, actually, a lot of this stuff could go to my staff. So it's finding the harmony for you, but getting those questions answered. And if you know what that feels like, you'll know what your staff feel like. So when you're communicating to them, make sure you give that information.
It's such a huge topic, isn't it? You know, when we're sort of thinking about anxiety and burnout and maintaining good habits, it's so important, especially now at the beginning of the new academic year. You know, we touched on how people have been working with you over the summer, you know, that kind of leisure sickness that they might have had at the beginning, that sort of 4 to 6 weeks they need to just kind of bring themselves back to a central norm. And then suddenly here we are, we're back at the new academic year. Annabel, I don't know about you, but this is probably felt to me one of the fastest summer holidays that I've ever been involved with since joining education. It's absolutely flown by. And if it's flown by for me, then I can't even imagine how sort of teachers and schools have felt as well. I kind of mentioned to you the other day that every morning I'm kind of getting up and listening to the radio as I'm going into work, and I'm hearing adverts for back to school campaigns and back to school deals from your local Tesco and your Sainsbury's and everything else. And sort of said, gosh, that must be awful for teachers and everybody who's connected with education, because it's a constant reminder that this is coming. You know, it's not far away now. And suddenly, you know, we're talking about this, that anxiety, that feeling of that fear, and that potential kind of cynicism that we were talking about from burnout potentially sort of begins to swell up within people. And it goes back to the first point that we were saying around maintaining good habits that they picked up over the summer, and how to use those good habits to continue the development and continue the well-being that they've picked up in the over the summer, to help maintain good work-life balance coming into the new academic year. So there's a lot of information that we've kind of discussed today. So thank you very much indeed. I really, really appreciate it. And I appreciate your time. If you were to say 3 kind of tricks or tips that you wanted to sort of just summarize today with, for any teachers or senior leaders watching this video today, what do you think those main tips would be?
I'm going to give them just a second, but just something that came to mind just when you were speaking there, Will. As an organisation, I would love, after this audit, when people see back to school adverts, it's what it means to them, right? So we see so much on social media going, oh, the teachers, they're going to, look at the back to school adverts and be thinking, oh, I've got to go back soon, and it feels horrible, and cynicism and everything else. There are teachers out there that see a back to school advert and cannot wait to get back, right? They cannot wait. They're like passionate about what they do, because to them it means being with the kids. It means like the fun and the creativity and everything else, because they feel good. Like, you want to get past at the end of this audit and have your staff wanting to go back to school, because they've had their break, they're a bit bored now, and they actually want to come back and see the kids. And I have seen posts from teachers that have felt that way. So it is possible. But we have on social media kind of promoted, I saw a great picture of I'm sure it was fake. There was the end of the aisle in the shop, and it was bottles of wine, and it says back to school. So definitely a teacher joke there. But again, like, it doesn't have to be that way. But my three things, I'm going to have to go back to that self-care triangle I spoke about: consistency, compassion, and patience. Right? In everything you do, whether it's personally or through the organization, they are the 3 key elements. If you get a good harmony of those, you'll get your work-life balance.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Annabel. Take care, and hope to see you again soon in the future.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.